Thursday, May the 8th to order. As you can see, this meeting is being held in person, and it can also be viewed on local cable channel 1303 or on the internet by accessing the town website at bucksportmaine.gov, clicking on Watch Meetings and selecting Town Council. Questions or comments may be submitted during this meeting by emailing slsart@bucksportmaine.gov or during the meeting by calling 307-8030. This would be a great time to turn off your cell phone. If you are going to speak this evening, please come to the podium. And if you speak or whisper in this room, it will be heard on TV no matter where you're sitting. Roll call. Jacob.
Deputy Mayor Eastman.
Here.
Councilor Tarian.
Here.
Councilor Hare.
Here.
Mayor Bissonnette.
Here.
Councilor Rabs.
Here.
Councilor Bishop.
Here.
Councilor Rankin.
Here.
Thank you, Jacob. We do not have any presentation of any town council recognitions this evening. We do have the minutes of a previous meeting, our meeting on April the 24th, to consider. I'll assume everyone's had a chance to review those.
Motion approved.
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We have a number of items of correspondence. We have a thank you letter from the Eastern Area Agency on Aging, as well as a thank you letter from the WIT program. We have a social agency funding letter from the Bucksport Community Concerns. We have the notification of an Orland police call on April the 26th of this year, and we have the departmental reports for April of 2025. Any questions on any of those? We do not have any ordinances to consider or introduce this evening. We have several discussion items. The first is a report from the Services Committee, and that would be Councilor Rankin.
Yep, we just, we're in support of the manager and assistant manager's suggestion to, rather than hire a facilities director as a new hire, which roughly is around $80,000 to affect the budget. The suggestion was to pull someone from the town in Public Works, eliminating the need for that new hire, and we're in support of it.
Will that be on our next agenda, or will that just be part of the budget process?
Out of the budget.
Thank you. And we have the story walk request from the Buck Memorial Library.
Good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Doug Knobloch, and I think there isn't very many here who don't. You notice I also sat close to the podium, so I didn't have to walk so far. So, 8th year, and I didn't bring any facts or figures because most of you know what the deal is, and I just would like to have your blessing, same as always. The 3 months of summer, give or take a week or two, depending upon weather and how energetic I am to get it up and down. So, but pretty much the same thing as it's always been, that from the gazebo down, 12 signs, change. Again, when we have the ambition to change them, but 8 years, pretty,
It's really fun.
it's been fun. I know Sue's enjoyed it.
It's fun.
I do, my grandchildren are now 15, but every summer.
It's a hit.
Yep.
Yeah,
We've done that
my only
a lot.
thing is that I like reading the stories, but I can't do the hopping on the one leg and the whole 9 yards. So that's it. Can we do it?
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? There you go.
All right, thank you
Yep.
very much.
Yep. All right, moving right along, we have a number of agenda items as well. The first is Resolve 2025-53, approving the renewal of a liquor license application for Ming's Garden.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions? All is in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Resolve 2025-54, which is awarding the real estate brokerage services for tax acquired properties bid to Two Rivers Realty LLC.
Can you just explain a little more on that process, Sue, from last time that we talked about it? Can you just complete the picture of what's happened?
The state law on the way in which a town can handle tax acquired property has changed dramatically over what it used to be, and now requires a real estate professional to handle these for a period of up to a year in terms of a sale, in order to attempt to get the fair market value as assessed of these properties. That was not a provision previously. In the information in front of you is some information that isn't part of this, that Council Rabs brought in from a session he attended at Maine Municipal this week, that gives a lot of information about the tax acquired property, the changes in this tax acquired property statute, but it's required to have, and rather than piecemeal this in terms of, the request is to have put out an RFP to get one entity to deal with this on the part of the community. This particular realty organization also is doing other communities' tax acquired property stuff as well. There's a lot of other steps to this that the town has to do, but the handling of the real estate has to, you have to list it with a real estate professional for up to a year in attempting to get the appraised price of the property.
Thank you for that. I just wanted the update so the public was aware of why this new process is happening. That's all.
It is a completely different process than what was. Towns are now almost in the real estate brokerage and sales business, as opposed to trying to just get his taxes back from properties that haven't paid.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any further questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next is 2025-55, approving the expense of up to $299,999.99 for the purchase of playground equipment for Ian's Playground.
Rich is here, and I want to commend him for the work that he's done in order to bring this playground in at a budget where it can now be constructed within the $300,000 budget that we can't exceed without a referendum vote, with some alterations that now allow for the underpinnings of this to be paid for as well, the chips and curb. There's a $50,000, close $48,000, I think, allowance for all of that to happen in this budget, and I'm comfortable with the fact that it can be done in that way. And in doing so, he has not decimated the playground. He and the committee and everybody who's worked on this so hard have done a really, really good job over a long period of time, and I feel bad at being the one that said, what about the base? But I would rather do that now than down the road have to come back and say, oh, by the way, we're gonna go over $300,000, and then we're all in the soup because we violated the charter. So that is it. The resolve, the $202,000 of this is ARPA money that you obligated in 2024 prior to the deadline of 12/31, and you can't use that money for anything else, or we send it back to the government. That's the way ARPA works. It was obligated for this purpose, and you can't change your mind after 12/31. So
I missed the amount, it's 200,000?
202.
202, thank you.
And the recreation revenue account is the one that has the balance of what's necessary to construct the playground. It pretty much wipes that account out, but that's a source that could be.
Yeah, Rich pointed out at last meeting that we've done a lot recently out of that recreation budget, like to sort of.
Not the
I
recreation
mean,
revenue reserve.
It's recreation reserve.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I thought you were sort of saying last time that you didn't foresee anything coming that we would need to dip into the reserve, at least in the near future, besides the playground.
The swimming pool, sorry.
Yeah,
hold
that's
on.
what I meant.
Swimming pool looks great. It's the best I've seen it in this condition right now.
Yeah.
It has been, that pool, the lines have been tested already this year to ensure that when we fill it, it's not gonna leak out through the bottom. We now test the lines ahead of time before we fill it, so that we don't do what happened, I think it was 3 years ago when we filled it and the lines had cracked over the winter and now we put antifreeze, I guess, in the, whatever you want, it's something that prevents them from freezing, and then they test them in the spring to make sure that that's not.
So the playground would be operational by mid-July,
Mid-August.
mid-August?
Yes. Yeah, set it back a month, but it's good. It's good because there was more time to make even more advances for even more savings to not come close to that 299 figure. I had a conversation with an entity about a donation of 200 cubic yards of the chips. I'm still waiting for a response. And Travis from Game Time came in on Tuesday, and we went to the playground and we talked about different things. He used his software that he has, and we really need 300 cubic yards of wood fiber is actually what it's called. The difference between wood fiber and play chips is wood fiber is not only a safety, it's also ADA compliant, and the reason being it's woody at the end. It's stringy. So if you imagine the more times that you compress on it and walk over it, it will actually bind together with other and make it a surface that's able to be ADA compliant versus wood chips, which aren't. Wood chips are pieces of wood that don't bind together.
So right now, though, it's Campbell's soup. It's in the price.
$248, $870, $79 is the cost of the playground. If we need to purchase the 300 cubic yards of the woody fiber, that is an additional $17,000, which would bring it to $265.
Okay.
Now, again, there's works to hopefully have that donate 200 of that 300 donated. So then on Wednesday, I went up with the Public Works Director, who took a bunch of his time to come up with me. I showed him what we discussed with Travis at Game Time, and Jay came up with some other means of making it very accessible for people, fixing of the curbing on what we can do, specific lengths of what we need to do. We don't need to rip out the whole thing. There is a 15-foot section and a 10-foot section that just need to replace for the curbing. There's the possibility of putting the gate back on at the front entrance and preventing that from coming in. The mill fill from Central Street that the town got could be used over there to prevent the runoff from coming on. It could also be used from moving the porta potties from their current location from the fence to the area next to, but not up against the concession stand. And then you generate a path for ADA with a new entry into the playground for ADA, which is closer and more easily accessible with more millings and fillings. All stuff that we have on hand and all stuff that we can do at no cost to the town.
So work.
It's been a week. It's been a lot of time there because it's, the resolve in front of you is $299, $99, $999. It's not to try to pull anything over anyone. It's the fact that I don't before I got to meet with Travis and Jay, I don't know what the cost of asphalt is. I don't know if the whole thing had to come out or if we could piecemeal it together. I didn't think outside the box about making a shorter run for the ADA instead of having it all over the place. And before I go any further with ADA, there was talks a month ago in regards to having ADA paths throughout the playground to get to certain pieces of equipment. That's cannot be done. The red lines that were showcased around the equipment has to be 100% safety. It has to be the wood fiber or the woody chips. So my recommendation is obviously the woody fiber. That's the ADA access on there. So just in case anyone's wondering at home, we are not allowed to.
I'd like to second the deputy mayor's motion to approve.
I'd just like to, before we do that, I'd like to thank you for the work you did. It's your job to go through, you did your thing, you presented it to us, you found a solution. You have met and exceeded expectations. I'll be quite honest, I had a discussion about this morning, and I was prepared to come in here tonight and say no going forward because of the amount, and it looked like it was gonna be about $100,000 worth of taxpayer money, and the cuts that the department people have come up with. Sue brought up a couple weeks ago, we are out of the chainsaw stage, we are into the scalpel stage. I mean, we're making very, very precise cuts, and you found a way, and I've changed my mind, and I'm in favor of it, so thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Jay and Travis, who's probably watching at home.
So we do have a motion, we do have a second. Do we have any other comments from the council? Good work. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You and the committee. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Make sure I'm in the right place here. Here we go. Resolve 2025-56, approving the memorandum of understanding with the town of Warland for the purchase of fuel from the town of Bucksport.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions, comments?
I need to abstain. I work on the department for different services over there, so I'm gonna.
No problem.
No,
I did, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Paul.
I had one question. It was under the, about how they pay us. Is this, are they gonna pay when Dead River gives us, or are they gonna be like the school system and pay once a month, or is that still to be determined?
In the MOU, it requires that they pay within 30 days of being invoiced.
Okay, so when would they be invoiced?
They would be
Once a month, once a quarter?
They're invoiced once a month.
Okay, yep, thanks.
Everybody, the RSU is invoiced once a month, and the other departments who utilize fuel are invoiced. The transfer of funding from public safety or the sewer department who have used the value of that is taken out of their line items for fuel and transferred as a revenue back into the inventory line that is, when we purchase fuel, it goes into an inventory, it then gets allocated by.
There's no added cost for us getting them their own cards and all that.
No, because
Codes
the
and
number of
codes.
things you can have is a gazillion. I think gazillion's probably an exaggeration, but the limitations on how many things. We had a question about that, you had a question about that when we went into this system, and it's that it isn't a limitation that we're ever gonna get close to, even with adding the 20 people that they have as identified.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained?
Abstained.
Thank you. And the last resolve for the evening, I believe, is 2025-57, approving a contract for seasonal mowing and string trimming services at Oak Hill Cemetery. That was included in your packet as well.
This is funded from Oak Hill Cemetery funds, not town of Bucksport taxpayer funding. And this cost is less per mowing than we paid the last time we contracted this thing out in several years ago. And the other thing that doing this does is it removes 22 hours a week, 22 hours every 2 weeks from Public Works in that, because this has been another big suck on their resources in terms of personnel, and putting this back in a contract stage outside of that also makes our proposal for facilities a more workable entity, because it putting this on Public Works was a big addition to what they were trying to accomplish with everything else, plus us pulling people out of the. I'm not laughing because it's funny, it isn't, but, you know, getting this, we had several years where we couldn't find anyone to take this contract. We advertised, we interviewed, we got nothing, and now we have a viable candidate who wishes to do the work, and hoping that you support it.
How would the council like to proceed?
Motion approved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, let's see, we do not have any resignations, appointments, assignments, or elections this evening, nor do we have a need to approve any quick claims, discharges, or deeds. We do, however, have a town manager's report.
It is with sadness that I am reporting that Bucksport Poet Laureate Patricia Smith Ranzoni has resigned as Poet Laureate for the community. Although the appointment was a lifetime one, after 11 years, she has decided that she wishes to step down from that honorary position. It is my intent to invite Pat to our next town council meeting where she can be recognized for all of her wonderful work. Her programs created, poems written, grants written, and more. She was recognized a few years ago with the Spirit of America Award as well. Her resignation letter is attached to this report and contains a lot of information regarding her work and where it will be archived, both at the local and the state level. As I mentioned earlier, Council Rabs attended a Maine Municipal Association session in Auburn this week and brought back information on the organization, as well as info on property foreclosure regulations and executive sessions. There's a packet of this information for each of you so you can review it and have it as a reference. Big thanks to all who participated in the waterfront cleanup this past Saturday, as well as to Guns N' Hoses for providing lunch. The town dock is in and the marina is set up as well, so we appear to be ready to go for the upcoming summer season. The following information was provided by the Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities Coalition in regard to the Mary Jane Bush Emergency Disaster Expo. We had 50 guests and 78 total attendees with vendors at our Mary Jane Bush Emergency Disaster Expo this past Saturday, May 3rd. We gave away 50 lanterns, flashlights, and raffled off 20 go bags. It was a wonderful success thanks to the help of the Emergency Disaster Subcommittee and our great vendors, 12 different organizations. For me, many thanks to Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities for the work in obtaining the grant for this project and coordinating the event. We appreciate their efforts to provide important emergency and disaster information to community residents as part of their mission. The sale of the spring fountain was completed this week. I still call it the spring fountain. It can have whatever name it wants. But when we started this on April 12th of 2021, with the disaster declaration, it is now sold. Our attorney is checking with the now former owner as to the status of the 2 lawsuits that we are named in regard to that property. I do not have information back on that yet. The town office is currently short-staffed while Assistant Manager Grant and Finance Director Wilson are in the process of interviewing for replacements. The office has been extremely busy with records requests for the vital records due to the Real ID program that is required for domestic air and all international travel. The state has been directing people to their town offices ahead of appointments with the state. We thank everyone in advance for their patience if there's a wait time that is longer than usual. The wall replacement project by Hannaford and the Buck Cemetery will be starting soon. The contractor is working with MDOT to ensure that the traffic management plan is as least intrusive as possible during that time. As far as the dams, we received another 2,200 plus pages of information on the dams this week. I am in the process of going through it to determine what relates to the Silver Lake Dam and what relates to Alamoosic and Toddy and the pipeline. It is a slow process, but doing it in-house saves legal fees. We will only refer those documents that are needed for our due diligence. We have no schedule yet, as of yet, to meet with the dam owners. However, the executive session at the end of this is for the purpose of discussing legal strategy with the council, which can't be discussed in public session. And finally, the landfill. The DEP received the final closure plan information from Bucksport Mill LLC, but the town has not yet received its copy. I contacted DEP and they contacted representatives of Bucksport Mill LLC to request that a copy be sent to the town. And I anticipate receipt of that by the beginning of next week. And the pool will be opening June 16th and closing August 22nd. There will be a doggy swim on the 23rd. After that, the pool is closed for the season. But as I mentioned earlier, lines have been tested, are in good shape. The pool, paint for the pool has been received, and that is going to be done prior to the filling of the pool. But with almost 7,000 visits to the pool last summer, we look forward to another busy summer season if it doesn't rain every day for coming up. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Sue? We do not need to set or hold any public hearings this evening. Discussion of items not on the agenda for council and public. We'll start with the public this evening. Going once. All right. Anything from the council this evening?
We mentioned earlier, well, we implied earlier discussions about Whole Ocean's property. Any word, any news, any update, any hope?
Yes. We've had contact by another organization that's interested in that property and has approached Whole Oceans, and there are some types of discussions going on for a project which would be virtually identical to what Whole Oceans had proposed. I really can't say much more than that because this is all but it is
That's fine, I just,
the first actual, we've referred a lot of interested parties to the owner of that property, and they've kind of gone into a dark hole. And this is the first one where there's been back and forth in response, so.
Good.
That's where that's at.
Just thank you to all the members of the public that took part in whether it was the Mary Jane Bush event at Brown Hall last weekend or the waterfront cleanup. And special thanks to Councilor Rankin, whose idea that was. So thank you everyone for that. Things look much better out there. And Rich, how sore were you on Sunday?
I was good.
Okay, all right. Yep. Rich did if you walk down over the hill right now and look to your left behind the auto parts store, you will notice that hill looks much different than it might have a week ago. And I would say Rich Rotel is responsible for about 99.1 or 2% of that. So anyway.
His actions were goat-like.
Yes.
Is what we observed.
Yes.
He went places
But we
no
don't want to get him
human
in
should
trouble.
have been
So we're
able
going
to go, and he did.
They may have told on you, Rich, but.
I don't know. Little birdie might have talked to her. I don't know.
Sorry.
Yeah, you know me. I don't like to start trouble. So, yep. But again, thank you. Do we have any upcoming public hearings, designation of topics for committee assignment, or any committee meetings that need to be scheduled?
Not to my knowledge, nobody has identified.
I have to tell you one little sidebar thing that, going down to Maine Municipal, I met with this young man, he's a selectman for a town that will remain anonymous. And I said, how often do you guys meet? He says, oh, we meet every other Thursday. Every other Thursday, they just go on. I said, really? He said, how many committees do you have? He said, 18. So, anyway,
18.
18. There are others out there that are quite busy,
Yeah.
18.
There used to be a lot more here.
Yeah.
We might have got more effective as we trimmed some off.
Yeah. If there's nothing else, the next item is budget review, and the first item under budget review is education, and I believe Dr. Tripp from the Horseshoe 25 is here.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Only good news.
Only good news, well,
End of discussion then.
I will do my best. So obviously, as you know, this is my first go around and putting together a budget by myself. Back in the middle of April, the school board did vote to approve this budget to move forward to the district budget meeting. That'll be happening in May. You know, when we were going through this process, we were, you know, one thing that, I just click, you said? Oh, there we go. One thing that they really wanted us to, wanted me to focus on was last year in the budget process, we eliminated 5 full-time employment positions out of the budget to try to get our increase down as low as we could. So this year, they really wanted me to focus on trying to deliver a budget that did not reduce our employment force, because we really had kind of gotten it as skinny as we could last year based on our numbers. And, you know, they said, put something together that's not gonna cut employees and programming. So that was the first thing that we really did focus on. And then we had to navigate a number of different challenges that have come to us basically through legislative practices, you know, that have come through, whether it be minimum salary requirements, paid family medical leave, and I'll kind of get into a little bit of that. So that was really the big thing. We did not want to touch our programming. You know, we've had very good success with our graduation rate at the high school. You know, last year we were at 93%. You know, we brought in just over $300,000 in tuition monies to the high school from school choice last year. And I think that's due to the excellent program that we've been able to offer. And that $300,000 certainly is offsetting a large chunk of expenses. So again, that was the focus, make sure that we can keep our programming so that we can continue to bring in, you know, the students choosing to come to Bucksport High School. So just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off here. Not the good news, I think that Councilor Rankin, you're exactly open for, but down in the bottom right-hand corner, the total budget come in at a 19.979 million, which is a 6.57% increase from budget to budget. Our first draft of this was just under 8% budget to budget. We were able to get it down to 6.57. You know, and out 5.5, just about 5.5% of that, I'm gonna be able to explain it come in all 4 categories. Salary and benefits, paid family medical leave, health insurance, and then salary and wages. I mean, that's where almost all of this budget has come from. So that was the breakdown by cost center. One thing that I am always really close to pay attention to is our per pupil expenditure. And if you take a look in the middle there, we're at 16,348, which is the lowest cost per pupil from any school around us. So we are still be able to deliver the programming at the cheapest cost per pupil rate that we can find. So to me, this is something that I know Mr. Boothby has always paid close attention to, that, you know, our cost per student is really where, as competitive as you can get around us.
Josh, real quick, and I'm not asking this question because I'm doubting you, I'm just asking it for clarification. That's all in cost? That's just.
So the state generates this.
Okay, I didn't know if it was a state number.
Yeah,
Alright,
this
yep.
is the state number that you go, so strict from their website, so they give us two calculations, they'll give us a cost per pupil, and then they'll give us tuition rates. I didn't provide you with the tuition rates, but they're right around the same thing, our tuition rates are lower, than our surrounding ones, but, yeah, so these are not numbers that I've calculated or generated, this is straight from the state in terms of, obviously, you'll see some of the smaller school districts, they have a smaller population, they still have some of the normal costs to run a building, so you're gonna see a higher cost per pupil. But for us to be lower than like a Brewer, Ellsworth, that have a bigger population than we do, we can still keep our cost per pupil down is what's important.
Maybe I'm jumping ahead on a slide, but when you said 6.5%,
6.57, yep.
what does it boil down to Bucksport? I mean, we're a member of the,
Yeah, I'll have that breakdown in terms of dollars and cents for just Bucksport and a percentage. Sorry, yeah, the 6.5 is the district budget total, but not to Bucksport.
Doesn't like you, Joe.
It doesn't. One of the cost drivers that you'll see in here, and this is just to kind of give some background to it, is our special education costs. So one thing that you will see in here, we started out with a $90,000 increase. We did cut it back to a $45,000 increase to account for added district tuition payment. If you take a look at our special education numbers, you'll actually, district-wide, the percentage of special education students has decreased slightly, but our high-need special education cost students has increased drastically. So that bottom right-hand corner, 27% of our special ed students have high education needs. On average, if we are to have a student that needs out-of-district placement based on their learning needs and their learning profile, it's anywhere from $55,000 to $70,000 a year per student.
To
So
be clear, you're mandated to pay that.
if an IEP
That's right.
is to determine that that student's needs need to be met, not within our district outside, we then have to cover that cost.
You may have already said this, but I don't think so. How many out-of-district placements do you have right now?
Right now, I don't.
Don't
'cause
know,
we've had
that's
talk about
okay.
that.
Put you on the
It's-
spot.
I think it's 7, I
Okay.
could be off on that. Some of that's in and out, they're not there for the full year, they will come back as soon as, they have certain needs met. We have situations often where students move into us that we have not budgeted for in the middle of the year, and their previous school district had identified an out-of-district placement as their least restrictive environment. We are on the hook to continue that when they move into our district, so that's not something that we then get to change that placement on us, so we have increased, and again, you'll see this in a second, we have increased our out-of-district tuition by $45,000. We do have a special education reserve fund that we have been building up. We have been lucky that we have not had to touch that the last few years. But we did not feel comfortable just relying on that solely, so we did build an additional $45,000 into the special education cost center, which really just will cover less than one student that needs that for a year. So these are the big cost drivers, like I said, 5.5% of this. The first one is our local debt increase. So the middle school project where we had to replace those walls that was voted on through referendum last year, that was an additional $118,000 where that first payment will come next year. So we were already obligated to add that into our local debt. Health insurance has been the bane of our budgeting existence. We don't get those numbers until about the second week of April. Our first draft, we put in a 14% increase, hoping that we would be able to eliminate some money out of our budget when we got our number, and it came in at 13.75%, or $330,000 of additional money in health insurance alone. That, again, we have no control over. As I said, we put $45,000 in for special education tuition, paid family medical leave. So, as you know, as legislative that has come in for paid family medical leave, we are splitting that cost with all of our employees, so 0.5% for the district and 0.5% to the employee. But anyone that was under a collective bargaining agreement, we did not have to contribute for that year. So like this year, our teachers were under a collective bargaining agreement, so we did not have to contribute to paid family medical leave. We only had to do it for people that were not under a CBA. We renegotiated that this year, so now next year they will have to contribute. And then the year after, we're also gonna see another jump because our support staff's CPA will expire at the end of next year, therefore then they will have to start to contribute. There is legislation out there right now that potentially school systems could become exempt for this, but we can't rely on, and we have to pass a budget before then, so. But that's an additional $50,000 just for our teaching staff that we have to contribute. And then just salary increases, like I said, there's legislation that is mandating minimum salary teacher increases, and people around us are negotiating to that, and we have to stay competitive. So just for normal step increases, it's an additional $490,000 of money in salary. So all of that total, that's just over $1 million of that increase that I showed you, about 5.51%. So we have less than about 1% of stuff, and as you know, things just cost more in terms of running the school system. So just in terms of cost sharing, specifically town of Bucksport, you had a slight increase, just more pupils from the town of Bucksport compared to the other ones. So it went from 59.5% to just over 60%. So of all the additional local that will come, 60% of that comes to the town of Bucksport. And Councilor Rabs, this is what you were looking for. In terms of cost by community, so according to the EPS formula, the 279, town of Bucksport is required to contribute 3.3 million, just over that. Their share of the additional local is 1.9 million. Our local debt contribution for Bucksport would be just over 300,000. Adult education, 91,000, for a total of 5.66 million. Which is just about $411,000 increase over last year in terms to the town of Bucksport, or a 7.83% increase. So that was the quick run through of the budget. Again, obviously, I wish I was bringing you smaller numbers and a smaller increase. But you know, outside of cutting programs and positions at this point, this really is as low as we possibly could get. I mean, we were nickeling and diming it at the very end of dues and fees. Could we take out $1,000 here, $2,000 there? But really, our major increases were all things that we didn't have a lot of control over. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think it's a good presentation, Dr. Tribb. I think, you know, the slide of the 5.51%, leaving you basically 1% outside of that slide where you talk about the local debt, which was approved at referendum, the health insurance, I doubt there's anyone in this room that needs to have that explained to them. I think it's smart on the special ed tuition piece, just knowing my previous role in the school committee, the superintendents live in fear all the time, that, you know, and it's really a shame. It's a soapbox of mine that if you if you have a school district that serves to serve the quote regular kids as best as you can, you will attract people to your community. And if you do the same for special ed students, if you try to have the best special ed program in your area, you will in all likelihood bankrupt your town. And that's not your fault. So it is what it is. And the FMLA and the salary increases, we know the part that legislation has played in that too. So I think that's a good presentation on that piece.
I'm just, if it really breaks down that if it were 6.5% for the whole RSU, and we're down at this we're down about the little over 2% range for,
It was
you know,
just over one.
Out of that 6.5%, Bucksport's doing about 2% of it, ish.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that, yep. that
You see
sounds
what I'm
right.
saying?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm,
Yeah, 411 out of the, I'd have to go back and look at what the total difference was, but 1.2, so yeah, yep.
I appreciated that chart for your cost per pupil analysis, and I don't think the surrounding communities would be able to use that as effectively as you did, so congratulations.
It is always a slide that we've been able to, I mean, it's just the easiest way, because again, it's not our numbers, right? And when it comes down to, that's,
I remember the year former Superintendent Boothby was here and something got published that Ellsworth's per pupil cost was lower than Bucksport. He was levitating
yeah.
at this.
As you might expect, I've seen Mr. Boothby at various,
Yes, I
various
have
tempers,
seen
and
that
that was
every
one of
once
the
in a while.
baddest I've ever seen.
You know, obviously, our biggest concern is our revenues, and the uncertainty moving forward of our revenues. We still have not received our projections for our federal monies for next year. And typically, we would have had those about 2 weeks ago. So, you know, we're doing all this projecting with flat federal revenues coming across. And obviously, when we get that information, we'll make adjustments as we need to necessary. And same thing with state revenues.
I was just gonna ask
Next
you,
year, we have, I expected back here next year, you know, I wish I could tell you, you know what, next year we're gonna be a lot better off. We got a new contract. We know what the raises are gonna be. I just don't know what our revenues are gonna look like. And honestly, for us, and we were fortunate this year, we got about an extra $480,000 in state subsidy when the 279 come out. You know, without that and without our tuition rates coming in at the high school, you know, like I said, where they're at, that 6.57 would be about 7.5 or 8%. And again, we don't have control over those types of revenues. So I do know that if we made significant cuts in our programming, you're not gonna see the tuition money come in on the other side. And, you know, I think that's where it gets difficult.
I appreciate all the work you guys put into this. I don't like your presentation, but
I get it.
Tripp, if I may ask, last year there was a cut, or
Get a copy of this
a
presentation.
transfer, sort of a service of like child social work or something, I can't recall exactly, but you were sort of, it sort of went to another agency. How was that working out?
I am I think, so we had reduced one of the full-time
right.
employment positions, we had reduced elementary school guidance position.
That's right, yeah, and how that worked out.
And so we contracted with, so we do still research services from Bucksport Regional Health Center. And we also tried to bring Acadia in as well. And unfortunately, it's a good partnership, except they can't find people to work. So it's really, and we've had the posting out there, and there's just not counselors out there.
I just remember it being a hard cut for the team.
It was,
Yeah.
and you know, and certainly we relied on, or we're hoping that we were gonna be able to supplant that with outside counseling services. In theory, it would have been a really good model if the people are out there. But, you know, where we used to get 10, 12 applications for these positions, if we get 2 or 3, and that's not an RSU 25, we're getting more than surrounding communities are. The applications just are not there, so.
Josh, can we get a copy of this presentation, just because I know we often get asked questions, and it'd be nice to do.
Yep.
I don't trust my memory or my handwriting, so that'd be great.
Absolutely, yeah, Jada has, and so I have a copy of this and they can pass it along.
I caught the end of the news last night. Aspire was out, but I caught the very end of it. Aspire is going to continue.
Yes. Yep, so the grant is officially ending at the end of this year. You know, what we have spent the last year doing is making sure that it was sustainable. So identifying the parts that the grant money is gone, you know, we have hired Jen on as, so she's now our employee and not, well, will be come July 1, will be our employee and not JMG's employee. But all of that work is going to continue. And that was part of the agreement when we signed on for the grant 6 years ago, that we would absorb that employee, but it has been a phenomenal program. It really has worked out well, and we're seeing the benefits from it. And I think the biggest key to it is that we have created so many more partnerships with our business community. They understand what's going on inside of our school and what we need, and the internships, the job shadows, the newsletters, the communication. I mean, that really has been powerful. You know, and again, I talk, what's that?
You're all on the way.
And when I talk about that 6.57%, if we didn't have the partnerships that you folks have allowed us, like if we didn't share technology services, if we didn't have to share fuel services, I mean, again, that would not be under a $20 million budget. and I know that we're both benefiting from those, but it's a very unique thing that you don't see in other school districts. I don't understand why, but we're certainly very grateful to have the working relationship that we do.
Will the JMG class still continue on at the high school?
Yep, yeah, we will still have it at
Middle
the,
school and high school?
yep.
I've never heard a bad thing about the
No, it's a-
JMG program.
It's a great program.
Anything else for Dr. Tripp?
For tuition students, are you anticipating a similar number of interest?
Yeah, so it's one of those things you never try to count on 100% of what you got the last year. You actually count on about 2/3, because that way, if they don't come, if something happens, then you're not creating a deficit for you inside of your budget. So, based on the enrollments that we have right now, I think we'll actually be up a little bit more, even from what we were this past year. But again, it's not something I dare go out and grab them more money, because if they don't, you know, and again, I think we get lots of good press, you know, from events like Aspire, and every time we do, you know, our open houses are very well attended and we get more registrations, and so that certainly does help us out.
And for contributing districts, our tuition rate is more attractive than
Correct.
um, sending these kids to other districts. So the towns will encourage them to
Yeah.
make different choices.
Well, the robotics team certainly keeps putting Bucksport on the map.
It does. Again, I think that's why the school board was really focused on not losing any more programs, because it's a very sharp cliff on the other side. It doesn't take too much for you to chop off when you start having to patch holes, and when you start patching holes, then, you know, it really becomes damaging to your program. So, yes, every time that they bring home a blue banner or make it to Worlds, and again, the investment that they get from the community on that, I mean, it's the most well-attended spaghetti supper that we have, and, you know, it's the amount of money that they bring in to support the school. And it's not just the robotics program, the equipment that they purchase that is used in that shop, all students have access to as well, so,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tripp.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, I got a call from a citizen. The internet is down in the building, so the live stream is currently not working. However, it is being recorded and will be uploaded at the conclusion of this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
My internet is not working, you're right, yep.
I'm sorry, Rich, I didn't.
Nope, I literally just submitted it, so.
Next is highway.
Just.
I'll follow.
I wasn't connecting the two, just didn't expect there to be no internet is the reason.
Good evening, council. Highway is on page 47 of your budget book. I will highlight just some of the, I guess, the big picture items and changes to the budget, and Public Works Director Lanford's in attendance tonight. He'll be able to answer some of the more specific questions about line items and so on and so forth. And I would mention right off that the recommendation that the committee and the council discussed tonight in regards to the facilities director position, as far as advertising that internally to the highway department, and just moving someone out of highway and not replacing an additional person to highway, will reduce this budget by approximately $50,000, this budget alone, by approximately $50,000, which is not reflected in the numbers that are before you right now. Obviously, there will be additional decreases with the insurance and benefits department, but from this budget, you'll see an approximate reduction of $50,000.
Question?
Yes.
We're gonna get into revenues be another night, or
Revenues is another night.
then can, just for those that can hear us or will view us, talk about impact of excise tax as on highway?
Well, excise, I believe our excise line is approximately $1 million.
That's correct. It's
Which,
down a little because our excise has hasn't done what it had typically done. I think we're looking at $1,050,000.
Yeah.
And excise tax was developed, Jacob knows this, for the purpose of offsetting the cost of maintaining roads. And we budget, it's all the revenue that offsets this budget, and a percentage of that we consider offsets the cost in the administrative office of collecting this. We have people whose job involves collecting this excise tax, but if you consider that, I think it's 85% of what we consider $850,000 about of excise tax would be an offset to this, what's now $1.1 million
Yeah.
budget.
I learned a lot I was in a learning curve recently, and I just thought people at home might wanna get on that same curve.
That is, that's always, the whole, it's not a requirement that excise tax be just used for, but for many communities, that is the single biggest source of funding used to take care of their roads. So this includes all of the paving, sand, salt, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff, and wages. It doesn't include benefits that would increase this number, but revenue is, the excise tax is a very large, that and the local road assistance, which is about another $75,000 that we get, that's dedicated to highway, offset to highway for their maintenance of the urban compact area that we have to take care of.
So looking at the budget, the 01 line is the regular payroll line. We have, of course, the Public Works Director, the mechanic, and we will have 5 full-time laborers / truck drivers / some of them are equipment operators as well, for that. They will all receive the 3% cost of living adjustment as well. The reason that's 1.66% is because we've had the retirement of some longtime employees, so who are at a much higher rate than the people that we have hired in their place. So that's why that line looks a little funny. The reason that the O2 line, the extra line, is a significant reduction is because we no longer use subs for plowing. Previously, we would have, so you have to jog my memory, I believe 2.
At one point, there was they used to hire
3.
3 full-time people from November through March, 40 hours a week, and that stopped several years ago, and we had just 1 or 2, and then we had an on-call fill-in thing, and then most recently, we've not utilized that at all.
And so those individuals were paid entirely out of the O2 line, and so that is the reduction in that line, because we are no longer doing that. Not a whole lot of other major changes. The biggest driver would be incorporating paving back into this budget. And I would just make a note that we didn't have the final number when we had put this together. We've got 200,000 in here, but that needs to be increased to, I believe, 221,000, which is what you have in front of you on that paving list. So that will be a little bit of an increase to that line, but that was not included. That was not a part of the budget last year, and so we certainly don't want to go 2 years without paving, and so incorporating that back into the budget certainly is a big increase, but those are some of the biggest drivers. And
The 21,000, when we get to transfer station, there's some proposal that we may be able to do some reductions in the disposal item costs. due to the fact that the Hamden plant, it will be back online this fall, so that's yet to come.
Right.
So the addition of that 25,000 to the 200 should not add that to the bottom line.
So those are some of the big picture items, and like I said, Jay is here and can answer some of the more department-specific questions if you have any.
Floor is open. Guess we're good.
Okay. Next is the town garage. This is the facility itself. You see a reduction of just shy of 14%. That's just to get us a little bit closer to in line to where our heating fuel and where our electricity is projecting.
Question?
I did have a question for Jay, if we could just take one step back, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We have, money allocated for gravel specifically, and we're not, I understand, like, different than salt sand, but gravel. Last year, we didn't gravel the sides of the roads, we didn't do the shouldering maintenance that we usually do. So what is this gravel gonna be used for?
It will be used for that this year. This past year, we used considerable amount of that money towards all the work that we did on the trails when we resurfaced
Okay.
all the trails around, and we cut all the brush around them and cleaned all that back and then resurfaced everything. We sent a lot of money towards that.
Okay. Thank you,
Sound good?
that's great.
All right.
If we're good with town garage,
Looks like we are. Yep.
the next is solid waste. This, of course, this department covers the transfer station, and the 2 full-time employees that are at the transfer station. I would say that the majority of the increase to this, would be, the increase to hauling and tipping fees, that we have seen, and also the additional increase to the 97 line, the well monitoring line, which we are now required to do. So, Sue, I know you wanted to.
The recycling line item that's budgeted in here at $18,000,
Under the 95
under the
line.
95 tipping fee is, there's $11,946 associated with hauling under the 94 line, and $18,000 under the tipping fee. And then there's a rental fee for that on top of that. And with the Hamden plant, which is already receiving some waste, coming online in the fall, everything goes there. Their process includes recycling and creation of byproducts from that process. That means we won't be using the extra can in the corner. It will all go into the trash and be hauled to go to that facility and be processed, and it will be at the $88 instead of $225 a ton cost. So removing the $11,946 hauling, we're currently hauling, and doing that 80 tons at $88 instead of 225 tons, and not having the trailer rental reduces this by about $25,000 net difference, which would offset the cost, the additional, to make sure that the pavement gets done, and also is consistent with our contract with the facility that it will be going to. So that's the proposal as of July 1. We do away with that other infrastructure at the facility and dispose of it that way.
Cause it's likely that we'll be receiving a phone call, I would say probably any day now, about the Hamden plant.
Yeah,
opening
because they've notified Jay that they will be contacting us for loads of waste, so that is,
Excellent.
it is excellent. I agree, it's a shorter run, number one, and because it includes everything, it's no longer, we no longer would have two different things, and it would still count as recycling because of the process that we use.
Where are we at with our maintenance of the trailers and the condition of them?
We have had a meeting with Jay recently to talk about possible alterations to our process that may not require the town acquiring these $100,000 trailers with I shouldn't say that, with complicated hydraulic systems that create a big mess underneath the building. But instead to do some modifications, and I don't mean tremendously expensive ones, to the facility that it would allow a different kind of trailer container to be used that could be hauled and done without the specialized stuff that we have to use now, whether that requires someone else to haul it or it's something that we alter the kind of vehicle that we have to haul things to do, but that it was pretty much the consensus, at least of the three of us in discussing this, that the hydraulic system was at Loring Air Force Base when it was acquired by the town more than
40 years,
Loring
50
was
years?
30 years ago.
In the early 90s.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. If it breaks, they've had to do surgery on it before. It's expensive and it's not easy, but having a rental container that is there that either gets hauled by others or we're able to haul on our own. This process is under consideration right now because $100,000 for a trailer to suit a system where the pieces that make it work are however many years, 40 years old or more, is not.
So you're thinking like those compactor containers like the town of Wallen has?
We were talking more like the open top
Roll-offs?
50-yard,
Yeah.
whatever, containers that there would be sort of, if you've ever been to the Belfast transfer station, they kind of go down a chute, you throw your trash down a chute, it lands in the trailers, and then it's not compacted, they need to be hauled more frequently, but it's also not as, when our current process dumps it in as this big hydraulic thing that pushes it around, and several times a year they have to go down and clean out the mess that results from that kind of activity. And like I said, it's a great question, but I can tell you that we've been working on what to present to the council for how to move this forward, understanding that we have one trailer right now that is not serviceable anymore. We have one that is doing it.
Yeah, I didn't wanna pin you into a process question, just financially, looking at what we have for trailer and truck repair, that dollar figure compared to what I know those trailers are worth, really in the line, that's where they came from, so.
Yep, no, it's a great question, and that we have undertaken those discussions to see what a future recommendation to the council for a change in operation at that facility might look like.
Jacob can solve that for next year.
Oh, he's already started.
We've got a meeting,
solving it, so.
meeting scheduled for Tuesday.
Alright.
He's ahead of you.
Any other questions? All right, health, should be pretty simple, I would think.
Yeah, this was a line that the town for years had a local health nurse who was paid out of this line. The code enforcement officer now serves in that capacity, and the proposal is, it's part of his salary. So really no need for this additional $1,300.
Should we, as we have streamlined and trimmed older styles of the budget, should we eliminate this from the budget and just place that on a line item within our code enforcement
Just
officer's
add it
budget?
to the hats that are listed on the list.
Right, that's what I'm saying, we,
Yeah.
as we've repositioned things.
Sure,
Alright.
for sure.
And general assistance.
General assistance is a state mandated program. We have an office staff member upstairs who administers the general assistance program. It's a very strict program based on a number of guidelines, income guidelines. There's a lot to it, and that is reimbursed right now at the rate of, I believe, 70%. There's, I believe, legislation that I don't know where sits in regards to that. That could potentially alter the reimbursement amount to the municipalities, but for right now, that's at 70%. So when we go over the revenues, you'll see 70% of this, which I believe is 4,200.
The town has traditionally had fairly low general assistance expenditures, and we haven't been as subject. The discussion at the state level of limiting the length of time that people can receive general assistance and that kind of thing it's in discussions. I'm not sure that, since we don't have long-term, we're not experiencing the things that they're talking about regulating, if you know what I mean.
Is that
in
like
terms
more
of-
service center, like homeless services in like urban centers and
Well, it was
things?
because Bangor and Portland are using 90% of the general assistance funds in the state,
Okay.
or some,
That is correct.
Approximately that.
and so other communities are not. That's what the big users are, and the drivers, I think, of some of the concern that it's not the short-term program it was
It's
designed
longer.
for, it's now a long-term.
I don't think that's the first state program that's lasted longer than anticipated per person. Yeah.
So that, but whatever is happening at the state level, I don't think it will have an impact here, because the number that's budgeted at 65 has a 70% offset, but if we spend 4,000, the revenue
Right.
moves down with whatever you do, and if it went up over that, the revenue would move up unless they change.
Yeah, and I would just add that we're very fortunate to have home next door to us, because if that were not the case, I think you would see this budget be a much larger number.
They
We
are
do-
an incredible asset
Yes,
to us in terms of helping us navigate some of these cases,
for sure.
including Spring Fountain back in the day.
Including.
Thanks for that.
All those years ago, yeah.
I still have nightmares.
Any questions on general assistance? If not, we move to decisions on the expense budget.
So this is your opportunity to kind of make some decisions on some of the question marks that we've had throughout the budget process. Really the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is social agency funding. That we had discussed that now would be the time to make that recommendation, because our intention is to present to you a second draft of the budget at the next meeting that you can send to public hearing. But we would like to know what direction to go in with that second draft that we present to you, so now is.
So facilities director, you're gonna incorporate the public safety cleaning back into the
Yes, sir.
budget?
Facilities, the, paving, the, building maintenance for public safety, we just did a,
Health. A small line.
well, that,
Yeah.
yeah, that one was,
The reduction of highway.
yes, highway and the transfer station changes in terms of the recycling costs, all of those. It sounds like there's been agreement to take those out of the budget. The things that we suggested tonight in terms of facilities stuff and the recycling, doing that differently as of July 1 and putting the $21,000 back in for paving and that. But those are the ones we've discussed, but the social agencies, you always, in the meeting before we do the final draft that goes to public hearing, you always kind of go down through and whatever's there, recommended or not, make decisions on anything that you want to be different in terms of those. And when we get to that, I have something I would like to say about some of that too.
Sure. How do we wanna do this? We can flip through and go department by department, just to make sure that we're not missing anything. Or we can just open the floor up and have at it.
I see no reason to not open up the floor and let us all
Hit
go
it.
for our own,
Yep.
get it over with. I've got two things. One, I would like to see the economic development director's cell phone expense placed back into the budget. It would be my goal that phone rings more this upcoming year than it ever has, so
I'm just gonna take notes
Sure.
over here, but happy to answer.
does anyone have any issue with that, or?
Other than the economic development director, and not because he doesn't wanna take more calls.
Right.
No, I agree with you. Absolutely.
The other thing that we talked about, last year, that we talking about in budget, is the camera on the waterfront that would be under the bridge with the fencing and everything. DOT has made repairs to the fence underneath the bridge on our side down by Irving, and, I am told that they will be painting and cleaning that area up. That's been a topic for a while, and, that camera costs about 7,000, I believe. Is that what we had?
I think so.
Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah. I really have no direct angle for my opinion on it, other than the fact that we are getting that area that's been a problem back up to par, and kind of a return on investment scenario for us. That's always been a problem spot. Director Gagan is here, if he wouldn't mind coming up and just shedding some light on what his thoughts are about the preservation of that area with a camera or without, if you don't mind, if you would weigh in on the conversation, that'd be helpful.
Just to clarify on the cleanup, we only found one needle from the bridge to Irving, so overall, I think that's pretty good.
Someone got there before you, good.
The thing that I would say about that area is that you cannot see it. We could check it at night if we're not busy, and just thinking about the things that we're dealing with on a daily and nightly basis. There would be some time, but I can't guarantee you that we're gonna check that every night at this point. So I don't think that a camera is a bad idea, because it's in the dispatch center and that can be viewed whenever it needs to be viewed and it's recorded and we can go back and things of that nature, so I think it's a good idea.
The big.
So at least we'll have something to go on when we're not there if something happens.
Yeah.
Cause right now we have nothing.
When you look at the damage that's been done, over the years.
Yep.
And the effort it takes to allocate resources to fix it from DOT specifically. How do you feel about the presence of a camera properly placed actually getting us a prosecutable case to aid us in prosecution to get restitution to reinstate the good condition of what's about to take place?
I would recommend it. Yeah. And without getting into it, I would not, the reason that fence was put up years and years and years ago is so that people wouldn't get up there and climb. Cause they climb across the bridge and they were sleeping up there and, I don't think that was very well designed. I don't think it's foolproof. I don't think it's a fence that should be there. If the normal person is gonna do damage goes and looks at that fence, they laugh. We've talked with DOT and I don't know what they put up or what they're gonna fix, but if they fix it with the same thing, the chances of it happening again are very good because it's destructible like that.
Thank you. Our crew, I say our crew, the town employees, the administration here has cut $598,000 out of the proposed budget of what was laid out from last year's expenditures. I would like us to entertain taking 7,000 of that 598,000 that has been cut and look at it as a reallocation towards the preservation of the investment of the waterfront of that area. How do we feel about that?
Okay. No issues for me.
I can support it.
Good with that? Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, I'd like to sort of open up sort of a discussion in the social services section, with, some of the recommendations for particularly Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities Coalition. I'm a little concerned about the size of the cut.
That's the one I was gonna talk about.
And, yeah, because it's 75% of their funding, and so
Can you give me a page number? I'm sorry.
it's not a.
Page 61.
61.
61, right here. Did you wanna go ahead?
I wanna preface this one. When we did the budget proposal, we had already approved funding Habitat for Humanity's, Fix-It program. The safety and accessibility program. And I just plugged $15,000 in it because that was the budget from the prior year. And when I was doing the annual ARPA report, American Rescue Plan funding for last year, and that money was appropriated from ARPA and prior to that, for that purpose, for $15,000, and realized that we had only spent a little over $6,000 of that. And so I contacted Habitat for Humanity and said, in terms of number of projects and in terms of what we're doing, is $8,400 sufficient to go through the 25-26 year? And she said yes, because they also have gotten other funding from some other entities as part of that program. And so the Habitat for Humanity line item does not need $15,000. And Assistant Manager Grant and I met with Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities to get a better idea of their programming and their the work that they're doing as part of an MOU with the town, which includes the Thrive program, assisting people in getting resources to be able to stay in their home, grant acquisition for programs like the emergency session that we just had, our age and ability friendly program, which is we had made them as staff to that for on behalf of the town, which they do that, and then staffing and coordinating our monthly Bucksport Area Service Network group, which is has been recognized all over as one of the most innovative ways that this community in this region has worked to put all the people who can make things happen in one place once a month to try and triage issues that arise. It started during COVID as a means of doing everything from getting Tozer's when it had a store in Searsport to deliver groceries in Bucksport to getting rides to medical appointments because those services were down, and coordinating the activities of the health center and the home and the town and public safety in a way that really has come up with a lot of innovative solutions to issues in ways that, as I said, other communities will come and say, how do you get all these people to come together once a month and try to fix things? And so I am recommending that you take the $15,000 that was, because that, I didn't know another way to not increase the bottom line and maintain the program that you already approved until, as I said, I looked at the actual expenditures, followed up to see what was actually necessary for 25-26, and realized that we already have that money appropriated from ARPA for the purpose in an amount sufficient to go through 25-26 and still meets the ARPA regulations to be expended by 12/31/26 because it will be done by June 30th of 2026.
So you're suggesting from the Hancock County Habitat for Humanity line to change that to zero it out? Okay, got it.
Well, it's because you already appropriated the funding from
Got it.
ARPA. That's not another budgetary item.
And shift that up to the
Bucksport Bay Healthy
91.
Communities.
Yep, got it.
And that, the 20,000 that they requested is still 5,000 less than what they had received in the prior year. Oh, they had requested and received in the prior year.
My only question, this is not a criticism to them, but I'm still not processing the 15,000 last year to them was to go towards Habitat. They were the middleman, correct?
They were the middleman. The $15,000 did not go to to Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities to do that program. The middleman piece of it was part of the MOU and a whole list of stuff that Bucksport Bay Healthy Communities also does as part of that MOU. The middleman piece coming out is the cost to them, which is the $5,000 reduction over what they asked for last year and they're getting this year, because the $15,000 we appropriated goes directly to Habitat for Humanity. None of that money goes to Bucksport Bay. My phone is blowing up.
Did you have anything to add?
I just really, I've attended some of the social service network meetings early on, and just, the group's gone through a reorg. I'm sort of the council rep who attends their meetings. I haven't, been at all of the meetings recently because they're going through a reorg, but I'm optimistic that, that the programs, I mean, the programs are important to people in Bucksport and particularly older people. The people that were at the event this Saturday were older residents, and especially, and also the year that one of their founders passed, I feel like it would be hard to send that message to citizens on the year that Mary Jane Bush passed away as well. And particularly older folks in our community. They've brought that part of that service net, but town manager needs to take some credit for this too. That service network work has brought people with expertise in substance use when we had an opioid crisis that Chief Gavigan probably still struggles with in town, but when it was first starting to explode, they brought clinics and things like that. So it's a pretty responsive resource for members, and I would just be concerned, given other things are falling off for social safety nets in our environment, it'd be hard to cut this one.
I was really waiting, hoping we could do this, but I am here as BBHCC's board president, happy to answer any questions you might have. I was like really excited to answer yours, but Sue did a great job answering it. I could tell you facts and figures, I can explain anything that you need to know, happy to do that. I've been board president now for about 3 months, in perfect timing because everything exploded, as the world likes to do, without notice, and we are going through a reorganization. And something I'd like to specifically speak to is that we matched 80% with our own funding, with our own grant writing and fundraising projects, 80% of what you gave us last year. So.
Questions for Rose?
I have no problem bringing it back the way they've suggested.
Sounds like another resource management scenario from everything else that's been done this year, so I have no problem with that.
I don't, I had it in my head that the 15,000 is what I had in my head, I'm like, well, they don't need that. I get it now, I get it now, so.
You sure? You sure?
It's kind of fun sitting behind Sue when you look at Sue with your I get it now smile.
Usually he just tells me not to talk so much. And he's right, I talk too much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rose.
Did the American Legion did they not put a request in this year?
They haven't,
That was a one-time request.
Yes, they told us a year
they
ago. it'd be
haven't,
one.
and I
Yep.
don't think they've expended,
Yeah, and I said, yeah, they.
Finance Director Wilson. You don't have to be sorry. The American Legion hasn't expended all 9,500.
No, I believe there's 1,500 left. I think only 7,500 was spent on the roof.
That's about what it shows, yep.
Okay.
I have a question about the childcare center. I know, so going from, it jumped up last year, and that was part of the need to help keep those childcare available, right?
Mhm.
Is that something that's long-term, or?
That will be an ongoing request if they're to stay in business, I think. Chris Rich, do you think that's an accurate statement?
I think last year we talked about, we would been giving them 2,000 and the need for childcare and the services that they were putting out. We came to a consensus that $8,000 is easily acceptable.
Yeah, for the new.
They're,
Yeah, they've done a great job. They've been able to reinstate some of the after-school care, and it's from the YMCA. The YMCA, I think at a peak was at 25 and it's down to 17. Some of the siblings of the kids have gone there. So yeah, if you still think about childcare in the area, there is no registered in Prospect. There is no registered in Verona. You've got Home and Little Tykes Daycare in Orland, and you have Bucksport Bay Childcare Center in Bucksport for the entire community.
yeah, that one was, I think they're necessary in order to.
Anyone else?
I do think the Historical Society has acted on what we asked them to do of being available when the cruise ships are in. I've spoken with a couple of the members and they've assured me that I know that there's some people that had concerns about will they be able to pay the electricity bill if we did this, and they've assured me that they would. And in the big picture, with the new service and heat pumps, you can't compare that to those 3 or 4 dehumidifiers they had running, because the electricity on a heat pump is far less than several dehumidifiers. I think we've been talking about this issue for 5 out of my 6 years here. And for $17,000 is all they're requesting. I think it's,
I guess my only concern is, I mean, they're still gonna have a building that they really can't make a year-round kind of thing, or it's just, you know, there's just, we're putting a Band-Aid on it, is what it feels like. But I understand the historical side of it, but
we're buying time, but protecting what's inside the building.
yes, I just wish there was some willingness to look at alternatives.
And I'm not saying that that's the spot for the Historical Society. I'm just saying we keep doing nothing about this, and it's 5 years going. We gotta at least do this. If they moved next year, these heat pumps can go with them.
Well, along those lines, many months ago, Councilor Eastman had suggested that get out of that building, if it meant selling it. It's their building on town land.
Correct.
And you had suggested selling the building and moving to a smaller space within town that would meet their heating and air conditioning needs. And after some thought, they decided, no, they wanted to stay there. But I understand where you're coming from about, and a couple other ideas that Plan B, C, D, you know, like go down that road. But first off, whether or not they could do something in conjunction with the library to establish some sort of a program that they could show off some of the artifacts they have over in the library on a rotating basis, or some critical items, get them over in there. People can see them, but also protect them. Another thought process was go down the road of my mind. It was to put under lock and key up at one of the schools some of the artifacts. In particular, have it put at a school that is studying the history that would be involved with all of the things that they have collected. Again, get them out of an environment. Parents, students, out-of-towners coming in for sporting events could see some more of the history. The thing that gets me is the low number of hours that they're open, the number of months, the number of hours. And then finally, one last idea that came about is, I remember Chris Johnson was in here speaking how they're in the process of archiving and taking a look at what they've got there. And if it turns out they have 3, 4, 5 of the same thing, about putting them out for bid to collectors. You know, the cruise ship that came in here from Norway, or one of those Nordic countries a couple years ago, they're all hyped up on seeing this. There are people out there that are collectors. All I'm saying is, as a way to get money, that if they've going through the archival process, if they have something in there that they've got lots of, why not sell it and raise some money? But I think the one that I like best in my head is putting it under lock and key up at a school where they're studying this and having it protected. I'm just throwing stuff against the wall to,
I have some
you know?
Some thoughts, like, I'm looking at it in two trajectories, like, it's clear that that building isn't the best building, but the heat pumps will be mobile with, what, I mean, not mobile, essentially
They can be moved.
moved. But we keep landing on their hours, and their hours are not out of range for historical societies.
No, their
We just don't
location.
like them being on the front. That, it's the real estate. But a historical society as hours go, like Blue Hill Historical Society, Costine, the one in Bar Harbor. Our historical society is not open any less than traditional ones, and so it's really just about the location, not their business model.
The location hurts them, they have.
Exactly, yeah.
I
I'm just trying to separate sort of the
down-
two
down at Castine,
conversations.
they got a wonderful grant for their historical society, but they're kind of cooked over here because it's town land with their building on it, and it really restricts the grant money they can get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like as far as the heat pumps, I mean, the dehumidifiers go, it's really just essentially not about their business model or whether or not that's the place for them. It's just about what's inside and preserving what's inside, for now. I mean, cause I think like the ideas that are brought to the table are worth exploring, but they're not in our control. These are two separate nonprofits that's not ours to know or have any control over. So in the meantime, how many more years will we wait for these types of things to be discussed to get those items in? I mean,
Yeah, I've been at it like 6 or 8 years.
huh?
We've been at it Ed's right, we've been at it 6 or 8 years,
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying, yeah, like, what?
I wouldn't care about their hours if they were in a village home, because that would make sense, but we have a downtown that doesn't have enough infrastructure to have enough businesses to flourish, and that's one of the most logical places in town for
No,
commercial.
I agree with that, I'm just saying.
But how do we
just-
get them there? How do we?
Well, not to punish them with holding back money to preserve the items.
Well,
So, I'm trying to
But they
figure
never
out,
come
like-
to the table willing to have any other discussion
Yeah,
but the one discussion we've had for 8 years.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
And
I-
the new number of 17,000 is the minimum, so it's like 17,000 or nothing to make it, to help preserve the items. Is that what we're at?
That's the cost of the electrical
Yeah.
installation and the heat pumps.
And I feel like they settled, it felt like at the last meeting, and I can't speak for them, but I interpreted at the last meeting that they had settled that it wasn't the best idea to do the renovation, expand it, and live there. So it felt like they heard what we said, which was, we just wanna preserve what's in there. We're not really putting a lot of energy into the building being its sweet spot. And they did that work, and they sort of came back with a quote. That's just my thought. I just can't hold it against them, their hours, for this discussion anyway, just for the budget purpose. It's two different.
And I know I've mentioned before that the library be the one that takes the hit on this, not because I don't think the library is an asset, they do an amazing job, they have a great board. I didn't like the fact that we were kinda told this year that we're not doing our fair share when we jumped substantially,
we've doubled in the past
more
6 or 8
than
years.
doubled in a year's time, and now we're being told that's not enough. I didn't like that. But I think the library is the one that can take the biggest hit if we have to cut people this year. Not that we'd ask them to go take more out of their endowment, but I don't believe they're taking as much interest as they could out of their endowment, so then we're not asking them to take money out, it's just take a little bit more of the interest. Even if we gave them 20 this year instead of the 35 they're asking, that would offset the Historical Society. I think we need to do something with the Historical Society this year.
So let me just make sure that there are 3 paths at this point, I just wanna make sure we're there. There's the consideration of, do we add $17,000 per the Historical Society's request? There's the consideration of, I guess it's I guess if that's one, then it would be 1A. The purpose of that would be to, what is the goal of us doing that? And then B, is that money that we're adding back into the budget in and of itself? Or is that money that we're adding to that line and taking from another line? I just wanna make sure that's where we are on this. Okay, yep.
So are you gonna come back with a recommendation about the library also, as you review expenses, or are we still chatting about that?
But the library's not under this
This is,
section.
you're absolutely right.
Say that again?
The
The
library is
not a
under the
community agency,
recreation.
It's under the recreation.
It's under recreation, but
We kinda need to talk about this all together.
Sure.
Because it used to live here, because that's sort of where the money is.
Yep.
In terms of, if you decide to do something, but I don't have a recommendation, I'm saying assistant, in terms of how you choose to address this, whether you choose to do the cap, if you use the 1% cap on this is 84,500. If you use the cap that your policy allows you to go to. Right now, our recommended amount is 51,692.
Yeah, so,
And
yeah,
if you added $17,000 to that, you're at 68,692. You're still under the cap for that, but it is an increase to the bottom line of.
and just, right, so we're clear, if we were close to the cap, taking it from another line item in another budget or department,
That's
that,
correct.
it has to come from this department if we were close to that. That's,
This is what funds the agencies that you have identified that are part of the cap. The recreation department is not part of your cap. Social agencies is part of the cap.
I would just, to open the discussion, to leave the library flat without an increase, since we have a gap in the cap. I don't know.
But this doesn't count towards that cap, the library, no?
this
The
does
library
not
and
count towards that
recreation
cap,
and-
yeah.
You just said that.
And,
Yep.
but
Got it.
our
And-
recommendation in recreation
Yeah.
is that it be funded at 30,000, not 35,000. That we keep it the same as last year.
I'm fine.
And what's on the library, under recreation, I still, the director came in and said they took $60,000 out of the endowment, wrote that to us, and then stated that night that that was about 3.2% of the endowment.
It's not of the endowment, it's of the interest that they earn on the endowment.
And they just met with their
Okay.
advisor, and that's gonna be there.
All I'm saying is, for an additional, a little over 1%, that would be the $30,000 that they're looking for. It's a big nut, okay? We have had groups that came in here that could not rub two nickels together. And I think when you have $1.8 million laying there in the background, the other thing I have a difficult time with this is, we're not the only town using this library. Where are the other towns? What are they contributing? If not, why not?
It's out of our control.
Paul,
And I
you just,
So,
yes, that just got me excited, cause there was a bunch of questions and
I
you just.
do not wanna cut off the discussion, but I wanna stay on this page, cause we're gonna wind ourselves up like this. We are on this page. The question before us is, the 17,000, are we okay with that? If we are okay with it, are there reasons that we're okay with it? I think that should be stated. I think Counselor Eastman has brought up an example of perhaps, in a way, saying, if he, please don't let me put words in your mouth, Mark, but if we were okay with that, we're not, this isn't a statement that we're okay with that building being there for
We
100
should
years.
try to encourage them to
Right.
formulate a plan for an alternative.
And also, if if we add that 17,000 back to the budget, we know what the cap is. Are we adding that 17,000 back to community agencies? Just as a flat number, or is it coming from from another community agency?
I mean, and this is also 17,000 one time, thinking, I mean, when you look at these again next year, right? I would look at this not as, okay, now we give 17,000 a year to the Historical Society. That's not, this is more, in my mind, of
One-shot
something to do to preserve the artifacts.
Much like what we did with the American Legion. Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up, that's where I was headed. As we look at this situation that's directly in front of us, I would encourage us not to only narrow our scope to the idea that this is a social agency line, but the topic of the heat pumps would directly preserve our history. Everything else that could be affected by leadership, quite frankly, of any groups, as demonstrated by the American Legion. That group was almost defunct, but because of leadership, it has risen and is doing very well, and including their real estate and their building. So that aside, looking at the possibilities of what could rise or fall, this dollar figure in my mind directly impacts the tangible artifacts that are in front of us. So do we want to encourage them to stay in that location with that money, with those tangible artifacts? Or is this the element that pushes them to remove them and make a plan for next winter on a faster timeline? It really
That's the
comes-
concern, because we could
really
be having
comes
the
to-
same conversation with whoever's sitting in this chair 5, 6, 7 years from now.
Right, those two. That's really where we're at with that. This is
There's
kind of,
likely a house coming up on Main Street, where the Enterprise was, and again, I mean, these are old historical houses, there might be an opportunity, would that 17 be better spent towards that as opposed to?
And quite frankly, we're within our rights to ask that question when it's us being asked to write the check. I'm not gonna frame that up any nicer than that. If we're gonna be asked to write certain checks for certain things, we get to ask those types of questions, period. So, just because I've received some perhaps criticism that we don't. And just as one person on this council, if we're gonna be asked to write a check on behalf of the taxpayers, we do. And so that is a valid point. I'm not trying to direct the question anyway, I'm just trying to keep it focused. So I guess the first question I have for the council is that the Historical Society has requested $17,000. Are we comfortable with meeting that request? And if we are, do we have anything is that for a dedicated purpose? Is that for?
I mean, if we were, I think the dedicated purpose would be solely and exclusively the preservation of the contents inside the building.
Agreed, I've said from the get-go that this is not me supporting they stay or we help them fund a new building where they're sitting. This is just, it's to buy time is what it is, and it can be moved if they do move.
it's an expensive Band-Aid though, it really is.
And it doesn't encourage.
17,000, you just said earlier, 7,000 for a camera.
Absolutely, that's an insurance policy. You know what I mean?
This is,
These people also, I mean, I haven't decided honestly, I'm just laying it out. No, this is my mind openly talking as it's thinking, but there's also the ability to move those items from that building to a safe location, as Councilor Rabs brought up earlier.
I think we've had that discussion with them in the past about could they move important stuff, and they just didn't want it.
I mean, ultimately, they get to decide as their own nonprofit that they wanna stay, and all we really have to decide is about the items inside the building. Like, we don't own any of the storage locations that we're saying they could store, or the buildings that they could buy, and so I worry about us banking tonight or making a decision based on something we don't have any control over down the road. We could be here again next year looking for heat pumps to keep we have zero control over any of these great ideas you guys are bringing up. We have control over the artifacts
No, they
being
have control,
preserved.
I would
They do.
disagree,
Being
they have
preserved.
control over the artifacts, and they're,
What I mean is, Counselor Eastman, is we have control over this proposal, this request, to preserve the artifacts, right?
I just feel like it's a band-aid.
I'm not in favor, I agree with Mark's comments, to be
We
honest.
want a vibrant Main Street, and we have to make some moves to do that, and it's, you know, we could be sitting here 5 years down the road, hopefully not me.
I think there are some legitimate alternatives to save those artifacts.
Yes, and they've never been looked at.
Do you feel like withholding this support will force their hand? Because I don't.
It's a catch-22 then we do it and then we still don't have any movement.
But we have the artifacts preserved, which is the goal of the money.
I suppose, but, I mean, they've had them there, we've had this discussion for 8 years and they've never been willing to have a different conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's the tricky part, because it could be another 8 years in discussion and we've got artifacts molding.
But ultimately, that falls on them and
I get that.
their
I know.
unwillingness to have an alternative conversation. I'm for helping them, it's just, I don't think this might get them down the road, but it doesn't get them to the ultimate place where
Right.
where they need to be.
If they had a different plan that still cost money, you would potentially
Yes, if-
support that,
yeah.
just not heat pumps, because that is,
The location, you know, it doesn't need to be on Main Street, and I know they want to be, but their fundraising hasn't demonstrated the ability to do it either.
but preservation may have a cost, but we're not comparing, we can't control what they
We're
decide
sort
to
of
do
trying to
with
make
that
a
money.
decision on something we don't actually know.
Right,
Like a new
right.
building could have some preservation budget
Sure, there,
line.
there could still be money that needs to be done to make
yeah,
a
it's
space
hard to know.
usable for them.
Yeah. I see the point, Counselor Smith. It's tricky, it's a hard one.
It is.
It is a difficult one. This is something that I feel like the Historical Society in the past 12 months has moved a little bit. This may be circumstantial, I don't mean it, I mean, they've had a little bit of a change in leadership. They obviously, I know they have been working with the cruise ship. I still don't, to Councilor Eastman's point, I don't think that relationship with the cruise ship is worthy of that place on the waterfront. And I also, we can continue to have conversations about what we're gonna do with that dock area from there down towards where the mill used to be. And I just see that continuing to be a holdup. Again, the question, and could we help them with money to make sure that those artifacts are preserved in a different location? And I'm not hearing anybody opposed to that. So this is a very, very tough issue. I see exactly where Councilor Rankin's coming from. I see exactly where Councilor Eastman's coming from. But I think I'm gonna call for a decision here, so.
Let's give them
have one
$10,000.
Sure. I mean, what about just enough to put an entrance in and do dehumidifiers, because they'll be cheaper with a better entrance, won't they? I mean, the expense of running them.
Well, dehumidifiers, when you get several dehumidifiers, they're gonna be substantially more electricity than a heat
And
pump.
somebody has to maintain them. I have a question.
Okay.
So the heat pump discussion is for present, what is beyond that? I guess if I were sitting in your shoes, the decision on a heat pump would depend on where does that get you? What is their plan, understanding that that building is not in any kind of shape that it is right now for anything long-term. It just isn't. Windows, insulation, and what's under it, all of it is, it's not good.
Yep.
And so if you put in heat pumps to take care of moisture, basically is what you're trying to do. It's like trying to do that in a sieve. The windows.
Moisture's gonna keep coming all winter.
Well, the windows there's nothing tight about the building. So there's that, but even if it worked, even if it did exactly what it's supposed to, is the plan to just let the building continue to sit there and deteriorate because there's no other money to do anything about anything and have the artifacts stay there? Generally, if you make an investment, where does it go? You know, and the heat pumps can go somewhere else. That's not my question. The question is, does it just mean that it still sits there and continues to deteriorate but the inside is getting dehumidified?
I mean, I question what
I
the
know,
coverage of the winter.
you know, sort of what's next is where, I haven't heard from the organization what's next in their plan for saving it.
Do we wanna allocate an amount of money potentially, I just threw out the number $10,000, but just for the preservation of artifacts specifically? And
I'm willing to do that.
with the understanding that future money, spent from the town would require a plan. This would show good faith on our part and interest to see a resolution come, progress made, leadership to display a plan, but our interest in the artifacts specifically, and that money to be directly implemented towards the preservation of the artifacts. And with no plan to expend any future money until there is a worthwhile, solid plan that we can all rally behind. Is that a discussion?
I'm willing to do that, but I mean, it needs to be more than the discussion we've had the last 7, 8, 9 years.
Yes, with content, yes.
I want more of a discussion whether or not they'd be interested in Plan B, C, or D.
Right.
Before spending that money. If they go, yeah, I like the idea of putting it up at a school.
Can we allocate
Under
it without
lock and
subject
key
to-
and nice cabinetry, whatever, yeah,
I mean, I feel like if we're not going to fully fund it, which I would roll with that, I would be opposed to partially funding it. I would be sort of, because I think it's an easier conversation. The reason it sounds like councilors are opposed to funding it is because the container of the building doesn't seem to support the goal anyway of keeping the artifacts okay, the building's deteriorating. I think that's sort of a valid conversation to have. If we partially fund it, I'd be a little worried that they have a plan for like the heat pump thing, but I don't know what they would do with a partial funding of 10.
The
in that
partial funding
goal.
would do nothing for them because it wouldn't accomplish what they've identified as the interim for keeping the stuff in the building from further deteriorating.
I agree with the town managers. In fact, if the building is in that bad a shape, you've got an arterial bleed that you're gonna put a Band-Aid on, the heat pump won't even keep up with it during the winter months.
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine.
All that
It-
moisture's coming up through.
Yep, you know, so, anyway.
I anticipate a conversation about the library, so I'm gonna ask for what our decision is.
I have
on-
one other option for you.
Okay,
You can appropriate money in an amount in the event that in working with the Historical Society, there is some money there for that purpose. It
I mean,
doesn't.
if they have a different plan.
If
we
it
could-
doesn't dedicate it, doesn't say this is a heat pump, it says this is a fund of money available.
And that could be Councillor Bishop's suggestion of like a partial amount or something.
Couldn't we do the 17, but with just allocated, not?
It
Not
doesn't
dedicated
mean
to something.
Finance Director Wilson's gonna write somebody a check tomorrow afternoon. There has to be a plan associated with whatever expenditure is identified, where it takes you beyond sticking something in the building for that.
in a
So
way
it
that.
provides some money to deal with the situation that Council Rankin is talking about and some leverage to assist them with
Broader
a
conversation.
broader conversation.
That would give us, I like that idea. We could set the money aside so we're prepared to give them some money,
Well,
but we
otherwise,
could.
you're not gonna have a way to help to do anything.
And there very easily could be $17,000 in a budget line a year from now. I hope that's not the case, but I guess the short way of putting this is kind of the
Good
council
idea.
putting our money where our mouth has been for the past few years on this. Like, we are aren't we
I get
meeting
all
people halfway if we do something like this and saying, listen, we've set aside money to work towards something positive with you here, but we've got to get to that point.
Yeah, I can rally behind that.
I can-
Allocated, not expended, with a plan.
Yep, more discussion.
A serious, in-depth discussion, no.
No,
None
we're
of-
not gonna
none
do
of this
anything
back
we
and
don't.
forth and then walk away with nothing.
And this discussion can't be sort of about making that building, because we're
We've
clear
been
we don't
down
want
that
that
road
to be
so
the
many times.
location, right?
They-
It has to be a forward movement discussion.
They cannot be under a delusion that we're willing to entertain that any further after the last two conversations we've had with them. If we need to clarify that again, I guess we will, but, I mean, come on.
This was
Yep.
seen as an interim step to something else
Right.
anyway, and
Yeah.
if you don't allocate it specifically to a purpose, but have it as a means of assisting, should that, then that would,
Keep the conversation moving, hopefully in a
It would-
productive direction.
it would provide a way to do that, and in such a way that could result in some more material progress.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Any opposition, just making sure I'm accounting for everyone, okay?
Jacob, that's what you gotta do. We gotta come up with an idea at 9 at night that ends a half-hour-long discussion for.
All right,
I'm not sure Jacob agrees with my idea, but.
All good.
before we move on to what has come up a number of times at the library, does anybody have anything else, just so that I can kinda, outside of the library for discussion this evening? If we're gonna be here until 10 o'clock, I kinda wanna keep the conversation moving. Not that I'm opposed to that, I'm just saying. Does anybody else have anything outside of the library that they wanted to make sure we covered this evening?
I do not.
No, I think we've done.
All right,
Good enough, Dan.
Yeah, we've done that.
so if we move to the recreation budget, I believe, if I'm hearing the council correctly, line 95, the request from the Buck Memorial Library is $34,608, the town manager, that's page 63.
63.
And the manager's recommendation is $30,000. We've had a bunch of conversation about that, and I will open the floor to where people are.
I agree with the 30,000. The reason for that is maintenance. It's a slippery slope when you start cutting established programs that have a budget. I understand, we've talked about their endowment, I understand that. There are plenty of other entities that we could talk about their resources. I would rather us focus on the steady, sustainable services for the town of Bucksport. That is where my mind is.
I can agree with that,
I
because
agree
they've done
with-
good work.
Me
They've,
too.
they're increasing the usage there at the library. I mean, I think just leaving it flat is fine with me.
Same
I
with-
agree.
I'm fine with it. The only reason I had that suggestion is for those two very reasons. We were told we're not doing enough, which irritated me.
Yep.
I found it a little offensive from what we did last year, and if we had to cut one to get one where it needs to be, the library was the one that thought could take the hit the most, but I'm fine with keeping them at 30.
I could lean on the town manager's recommendation for the 30,000 specifically, and my initial thought process with this when they did, I mean, it was a shocker when we learned what their endowment was, but honestly, if we were to dig into the financials of all the aspects of all the things, I really think if we narrow our scope to what we spend, to what we receive, then that's an important angle for us to look at.
I think this will be a more robust conversation as you move forward, because you know that the goal is a much higher number than this. The goal is $12 per capita, which is more than $60,000 a year from the town of Bucksport, which funds almost half their budget. And that will be a discussion that you and Jacob will have in the future. But
You're blessed.
the goal is because of the discussion of how well supported they are, but it relies more heavily on the town of Bucksport than any other, and it doesn't require them to do things like charge for cards for non-residents or do make policy changes that might generate more revenue than they currently do. Now, all of, this is a private library. It provides services in the community. We target money to entities in the community that provide services to the community, but with the understanding that we have no oversight, supervision, ownership, or control of these organizations. And when you get to a point where you're funding almost 50% of their budget or being asked to, I'm assuming that there will be a higher requirement than there currently is for review of a lot of things in regard to the endowment. If you're providing 50% or 45% of an organization's budget, it is not unreasonable to say you're making 5% on 200,000, that's $100,000 a year, and you're using 60.
Right.
That means you're growing your endowment at that additional rate annually.
Exactly, they
And-
have grown.
And so, which is
That's
wise.
responsible.
I'm not suggesting it's not, but
Oh, no, they have a
in-
good financial advisor, obviously.
in terms of future, this year, we're funding at the prior years, the recommendation is to fund at the prior years. It isn't 35,000, it's 30,000. In the same way that Bucksport Bay is 20, not 25, and,
Yeah.
you know, we.
Yeah, I mean, I support it flat. We're not in a position to be sort of increasing. And I also feel like years going forward, there's gonna need to be some due diligence. I'd like to kind of explore next year if we can look at the application process, because this endowment thing, I think, we have a point about, I think there needs to be discernment with other endowment relationships if this is going to be a basis for a decision. That's all I'm saying.
I
Well, it
agree.
also could
I think
be-
it should be a question we ask if we wanna know.
Of all the applications, yeah.
Well, and as we get closer to what Sue talked about with 45%, that's another aspect of we're covering
Right.
45% of your
Right.
budget.
Exactly, right.
And I have issues with a lot of that too, is like, Town of Orland only gives $3,000, cause that's their cap, they're not giving a penny more.
Yeah.
Verona,
Cut, they didn't do 1,500.
Yeah, and I believe though the town of Orland doesn't give to the homeless shelter either.
that I don't know.
I know.
You've been sitting patient.
I'm just, the remarks about the other towns, we kept going down that road. I agree with it's a private library, we have no control. And if they took out 3.2%, if they had upped that to 4.8%, that would have been the 60,000 plus the $30,000 they needed, and they would have met it.
And
So
like we
those
keep
are
the-
my 4 key bullet points. So as far as I'm concerned, it's 0. But that's my,
And I think that's,
2 cents.
I see that, I acknowledge that, and that's math, and I appreciate that. And I think that's a great expectation to lay out for next year with a lot of these things that have come down the road, so they can make plans. A lot of these things that come before us, they're gonna have to start fundraising and doing their own process to determine what their revenue streams are gonna be. And, putting them on notice of the things that we are discussing and looking at is gonna be a wise decision, I think. So, thank you for that.
And I think we had an example tonight of that when Bucksport Bay was in front of us,
Yeah.
that this past year, they raised to fund their own 80% of what we gave them. That's not happened in the time that I've been here. Their total reliance, and there has been the town and a very little other money that they had. And the result of that is that the money that we provided out and the money that they raised has allowed them to expand the services that they provide to people in this area, so that.
well then why don't we, Plan B, we'll put a fire under them and only give them half the money and say, look, we need a plan, we want to go with half. I just, the 30,000 is just, we've watched all these department heads come in front of us and tell us about what they did during this budget season to get where they have gone. And we've heard sidebar conversations about some of the conversations that took place between town management and these department heads. Didn't sound like it was too pleasant at times. And we looked them in the eye, and I really struggle with that $30,000. Now, cutting it back to 15, putting the fire under them, okay?
Well, I think, Paul, to my opinion, in my opinion, they've done a lot of work. I mean, where the library was at 8, 9 years ago compared to where it is today is, the state didn't consider it a library back then. So I'm hesitant to just cut the funding,
I
you know,
feel
but
like-
give them some notice that, yeah,
And nobody can argue that what it was and what it is now, they've done an amazing job.
And there are
Nobody can argue.
increased costs that come with doing all that programming, so even though we're giving them the same, giving them the same amount, they're doing more for the community than,
I'm just one of 7.
yeah, but I mean,
but I hear your point, and I think that is valid going forward.
Completely valid point, yeah.
I think
I
we
know.
need discussions with them too, of maybe they should be charging for towns that don't contribute. Cause I know, I haven't seen the numbers, but I'm assuming Bucksport, Orland, Bucksport's higher, but probably not as much as we think. There's probably a lot of people from Orland in there.
Oh, I wanna say it was like
We have the numbers.
1,400 or
Yeah.
something.
I was looking at.
Yeah, they gave us the numbers of patrons.
But,
who-
but even,
The time for the discussion of if you're gonna change the way you do this process isn't when you're voting on what to do with this year.
No.
Fall, the lead up to next budget season.
That's,
That would be.
Everything I'm saying,
Yeah.
everything I'm saying tonight is down the road. I'll go along with the 30.
but, yeah, and I know I spoke a couple meetings ago out of turn, and I'm not gonna repeat what I said then, I'm actually gonna take it a different direction. The whole $12 per person, I don't even wanna hear that conversation until all of the towns that, are being served by that library are paying that rate as well.
Or at least
I don't
paying the rate that we're paying.
Right, as one of 7, I don't even wanna hear that. I don't want, I'm not criticizing the decisions made by boards in other towns, and you can also change rules too. What I'm saying is, what can't be off the table is that if Bucksport is gonna sign up for X amount of dollars, that we can't even have a conversation about, the towns outside of Bucksport that aren't contributing, anything. That we just can't even approach that conversation, and that does not hold water. That is, I know I spoke for the library a couple of weeks ago, but I cannot as one person, I cannot tolerate being told that a community that wants to use the library can't come up with a relatively small amount of money in order to help support the cause, and so yeah, the conversation needs to be, if that's the case, then you're gonna charge non-residents X amount of dollars to make up for what really should be approved. Most businesses would consider that lost revenue. And I think that needs to be on the table too.
I think that's a good point, because I would be willing to bet the library is asking these towns for a contribution in their warrant process, and they don't have control over the decision. And so maybe our point is the charging for towns that aren't contributing that way would have to be offset to the residents, because the library, I'm pretty sure, like, I went to a lot of warrant processes in my career, and Bucksport's really the only town that said yes. The city of Ellsworth, $1,500 versus $5,000 back when I was director of the homeless shelter. They have like a 25-bed shelter in Ellsworth, so it's oftentimes not in the nonprofit's control if there's no money coming from that municipality. But we can sort of recommend, maybe you charge towns that aren't contributing, put it on the patron.
My mind is hold the line, honestly. Just, I feel like I learned so much from our building tours, honestly, that we've lost enough in regards to businesses, we've lost enough in momentum for things that are gonna cost us money, and there's a degree that we can be steady and consistent to keep what we have left in some aspects. And that's where all of that from me comes from.
Yeah. And my support's not in support of going all the way up to $12 a person, it's just flat
Correct.
for this year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I talk a big game. I would break my heart to see a kid get charged. I don't care where they live, but you see where I'm going with it. At some point, you've got to have a conversation about that. People have to contribute, and I think there can be a productive conversation about that.
Well, cause those patrons could take it to their selectmen,
Exactly.
you know, and say, hey,
Ours would.
That's right. Okay. So I think have we given enough guidance for a second draft? Okay, and we'll review that in our next meeting, and thank you, everyone. So I'm not supposed to say, sometimes this is like watching, I'm supposed to say something else and I can't remember what that is. The old phrase is watching the sausage be made, which is just gross. But it is what it is. But I really, really value the opinions of everyone on this council. Because every point was good tonight, and that's not just lip service. I love the fact that we're at the point of the scalpel, and that, you know, we take this very seriously. And so thank you all for your efforts, and thank you all for hanging out with us tonight.
We have executive session, right?
We do have an executive session, so the next item on the agenda is that executive session, and I put my agenda away. We need to move into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056E, consultations with legal counsel. I do not believe we will be taking any action out of that executive